The poll that SoCal Strategies conducted last month shows that JD Vance is significantly more popular than Gavin Newsom, who just retook the betting odds lead for the Democrat nomination in 2028. Hello everyone and welcome back to another video with your favorite electoral analyst on Point Politics. Hit the like button and subscribe if you want more content just like this. Looking at this data that we have here, it is a disaster for Gavin Newsom. Just across the board, Vance is favorable 37% nationwide to Gavin's 26%. And when you put that together on an electoral map and you look at the crosstabs, and you put together this model that I have, it is a disaster for the Republican Party, or for the Democrat Party actually, in this hypothetical matchup between Gavin Newsom and JD Vance. Now, JD Vance is particularly popular with, some college whites, particularly young voters, for the most part, so he will appeal to that demographic, but he's also very popular in the Rust Belt states up here in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois. He has a very unique appeal in these places, but not only that, he also is significantly more popular than Gavin Newsom, who's heavily disliked, even with a lot of Californians and even a whole of the Democratic Party. I mean, he's only favorable in the 40% in his own home state. And so that is definitely going to be an interesting sign. And looking at the data that we have in this poll, I mean, Vance is up with white voters by 17 points against Gavin. Other voters, he's up 3 points. With race, he's tied with Hispanics. Gavin is barely ahead of Vance with black voters, and we clearly see that Vance is performing extremely well. With white college voters, Vance is beating him by 10 points in favorability, and with white non-college voters, it's not even close. So this election would be an absolute smackdown in the Electoral College. Looking at the safe Republican states, which there are quite many in this matchup, again, the popular vote in this one, I think in the model comes out to roughly plus like 12 for Vance, plus 13. He absolutely demolishes Gavin Newsom in this hypothetical matchup according to the model and the polling data that we have. I mean, you're talking about like dictator margins in some states. And again, Vance doesn't really gain a lot with non-college whites. He only gains like about 6 points from Trump's 2024 performance. I actually see that he's actually gaining significantly more with Hispanics, and not even that much more. The groups that really shift towards Vance in this matchup are black and white college educated voters. Those are the two groups, as well as Asian voters, shift heavily into the Republican column. Hispanics and white non-college voters only shift like 4 to 6 points to the right. The white college vote shifts from about D+6 in 2024 to about like R+10 in this election, because there's just a bunch of Democrats who don't come out to vote for Gavin. And JD has a unique appeal with those type of voters, and you see the black vote basically becomes tied in this matchup. So you're going to be seeing some very weird results in some states. Iowa in this hypothetical comes out to a 22-point win for JD Vance. This is a way bigger win than the victory you saw in the last election, where Trump only won it by 13.2. You're almost seeing about roughly an 8-point shift in the state of Iowa. In the state of Ohio, a 24-point win, so a 13-point shift on the map. So it doesn't even move as much as the nation does. That's pretty insane. The state of Texas comes out to plus 20 in this hypothetical matchup, plus 21 for Vance. And in the state of Florida, we see here plus 24 in the state of Florida. So not even competitive at all. Maine second is in the safe Republican column at plus 21 for Vance, which should give you a good sign for JD in the state of Maine. We'll get to that in a second. But when we look at the other safe Republican states, yes, there's more states that go to him by over 10 percentage points. We see that the state of Arizona is a 15-point win, so a 10-point improvement from Trump's victory in the state. Nevada coming in at a whopping 14.5 points for Vance in this matchup. In the state of Wisconsin, a 12-point win. The state of Michigan, 15 points rounded out. And in Michigan, about also 14 points rounded out as well, with North Carolina and Georgia also being at about 15 and 14 points respectively. So Georgia and North Carolina are voting just as red as Nevada and Arizona, given the fact that the black vote shifts so much into the Republican column here. And when you look at this, Vance is already out the gate with 312 safe electoral college votes in this hypothetical. This Newsom doesn't really have a lot. I mean, he only wins California by about 10 points in this matchup, which is 10 points worse of a performance than Kamala Harris does. So he's only winning California by 10. Hawaii comes out to a mere 12-point win. Maryland also comes out to just 10 points. DC probably about a 60, 70-point win for Gavin. But Maryland's only like a 10-point win. Not very impressive whatsoever. For Governor Newsom. And Vermont, just 20 points, 19 points in the state, means first is only a 10-point win, and Massachusetts coming in at just about 14 for Gavin Newsom. I'd also expect a lot of third-party voting in this election, especially with Gavin being ridiculously unpopular as a general nominee. And for the likely Republican states, New Mexico coming in at about 6.5 percentage points. So basically a direct inverse of the state from 2024. You'd probably see a lot of these blue areas shift extremely hard to the right. The state would depolarize like crazy. A lot of these red counties would kind of max out. Some would shift right. Some would, barely shift right. But for the most part, you'd see the blue county shift the most into the Republican direction, which is why Vance is gaining so much. Texas, the same thing. A lot of the red counties would kind of stay the same. You'd see a lot of like Dallas would get within a couple points, probably even flip to Vance. Travis County would get down to like 10 points. The southern border would basically be deep red. Zavala would probably end up being a single-digit race in either direction. Jim Hogg and Brooks would flip to Vance like crazy, or probably almost barely flip to Vance. So it would be a very interesting county map, because Vance is just picking up a bunch of ground in blue areas due to low turnout on the Democrat side and some voting flippage as well. He doesn't really add a lot of voters to the Republican base. It's just a lot of Democrats from 2024 who decide not to vote, and that's where you get these ridiculous margins. Minnesota at R+6 for JD. He's winning Minnesota very comfortably in this matchup. Virginia at 7.2%. So the state of Virginia is voting to the right of Minnesota and New Mexico, hence why he's doing significantly better in the black vote. That's the biggest shift in the entire map, and that's what you're going to see in the Northeast unfold very, very quickly. We could see here a few more likely states. Maine at large ends up being in the likely column for JD as well, and Nebraska second is a 5-point win for JD Vance as well, with 343 electoral college votes in his column in an absolute grand fashion landslide here. The state of Washington ends up coming in at about 5.6 percentage points. This is significantly closer, 13 points closer than the last election where Harris wins it by 18 percentage points. And I believe that's actually literally his only likely state on the whole map. I also forgot to add New Jersey to the safe Republican column. Yes, guys, the state of New Jersey actually votes to the right of Virginia, Minnesota, New Mexico, Maine, and New Hampshire. They all vote to the right, which is pretty crazy. But New Jersey takes this huge turn in the Republican direction in this hypothetical due to the black and white college vote shifting extremely hard in his direction. So that kind of puts the state at a pretty particularly crazy moment where, Vance is basically winning New Jersey with pretty great ease. Meanwhile, he's just barely winning, the state, barely winning some other states as well. So that is definitely a really big factor in the state of New Jersey. Now, looking at some of these other hypotheticals, New Hampshire is in the lean Republican column at just about 4.5 points for JD Vance. New Hampshire's been trending to the left, but given the landslide nature of this election, it would not surprise me to see this state beat in this column. By the way, I just realized that New Jersey does not actually fall in the likely column or in the safe column at all. It's actually in the lean column. I don't know why the model was messing up there for a second, but it is actually in the lean category at 4.5 points for JD. So that's kind of where that's sitting. Illinois, a lean margin in the state of Illinois. So that's where you're seeing that 11 points in 2024. And you see Illinois just 1.5 points, precisely 1.3% for Newsom. So it's very, very, very competitive, very close state in this election. Oregon, the same thing, very competitive state. Barely ends up going Democrat, just 3.4% in Gavin's column, which gives Gavin 125 electoral votes. Connecticut and Delaware also land in this column as well at very, very competitive states. You know, you see the state of Connecticut 1.1%, Rhode Island at 2 points for Gavin. So that's where you're getting those margins. Very competitive right now in this environment. And you have 3 tilt states on this map, with Gavin Newsom barely picking off the state of New York. He only wins it by 0.4, probably by a couple thousand votes. It would be a very close swing state in this hypothetical, but Gavin would barely win it. However, we see JD pick off the state of Delaware in this matchup at about R plus 13 or 14 in the popular vote. He barely wins the state of Delaware, and Colorado barely flips into Vance's column at 0.04%. One of the closest election results that you've seen in modern political history. And so looking at the polling data that we found, this is the type of map that you'd actually see with JD Vance against Gavin Newsom. Now, we did some polling in December that showed, I think it was Vance up by like 6 in the national popular vote against Gavin. But you got to remember, guys, the fires did dip Gavin's approval rating very, very low as of recently. And so that would be a humongous problem for the Democrats running Gavin Newsom. His approval rating probably tanked massively after the California fires. And so that's why you're seeing a landslide map for JD Vance. If you guys did enjoy this video, make sure to hit the like button and to subscribe if you want more content just like this. And guys, make sure to go ahead and drop some comments down below on some hypothetical presidential matchups. I will probably start a series called Hypothetical Presidential Matchups and basically just go along with them and play around and give my hypothetical analysis on how each of those would go. I think the next one I'm going to be doing is Andy Beshear versus Ron DeSantis. I had a comment giving me a bunch of presidential matchup suggestions, so I think I'm going to go ahead and do that one next. I will see you guys in the next video.